Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker and I'm your host. And I'm looking to help you focus on what matters in your business, to find the most important levers and drivers that are going to make a difference for you to drive your business forward faster. And today, I'm really excited to have Lou Adler with me. He is the CEO and founder of the Adler Group consulting and training company that helps to implement win-win hiring. And basically, he has a performance-based hiring system for finding and hiring exceptional talent. Like, hello, that's why you guys have to listen carefully and take notes, because this is the biggest challenge that many companies are talking about today, is how to hire great people, how to find and how to hire great people. And more than 40,000 recruiters and hiring managers have attended his groundbreaking workshops over the past 20 years. And he has a number of amazing top Amazon bestseller books that you can check out in the show notes, including Hire with Your Head and The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired. And he's been featured on Fox News, and his articles can be found in Inc. magazine, Business Insider, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. So without further ado, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Penny. Look forward to chatting with you.
So you've been in this business for a long time. Tell me, why did you get into this business?
Well, getting into that's a long story, but I'll make it short.
You have 2 minutes.
I'll go shorter than that even. I was running a manufacturing company when I was 32 years old, hated the group president, started using these recruiters and realized that I could become a recruiter. So I just quit and became a recruiter. Stupid. I was actually going to use it to find another job. But as I started doing recruiting, I realized if you do it the right way, you actually can create a business process that works. Over the years, that eventually became performance-based hiring. So that's the quick reason is it wasn't a planned, thought out, insightful move to become a recruiter. It was kind of like, I hate my boss, I'll quit. I gave him 6 months notice and did it, and then realized, hey, this is actually a pretty interesting career if you do it the right way.
I think some of the best accidents, right? The best things happen out of so-called accidents or weren't planned that way. So it sounds like you built an amazing business from that. So it was obviously meant to be.
Yeah, well, I talked to an old fraternity brother because I graduated 50 plus years ago from college, and I reconnected with an old fraternity brother. He said, how did you get to become a recruiter? We said, well, you remember, Andy, I used to be the rush chairman a couple of years. If you're not familiar with that, is you go out and hire people, or you recruit candidates or kids for your fraternity.
Right.
So
right.
It must have been genetic or somewhere.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So, you know what I was thinking is, as we were going to talk, you've seen a lot of changes over the years, probably in the business. So I guess what I'd love to hear is what's changed in recruitment and what's the same, because there's still some things that need to be done the same, even though the people are changing or the culture of recruitment is changing. So let's start with what stayed the same. Let's start there.
Well, let me kind of just say, sadly, everything has stayed the same and nothing's changed. Let me start with that. But when I wrote the first edition of Hire with Your Head in 1997, I had been a recruiter for 20 years. And at that time, applicant tracking systems were coming into play. Job boards were just coming out. Every company created a new job board. Recruiters were being hired in-house and companies were going to bring in-house recruiters. And McKinsey had to study the war for talent and how critical hiring people was. And they scientifically proved that it improved company ROI. Then there was things, say, all these new tools will allow companies to win the war for talent. So in that book, or maybe at that time, I had a cartoon drawn that said, I don't think this is going to happen. And the cartoon was a bucket showing advertising dollars going into the bucket, wasted dollars on bad interviewing, candidates who couldn't find jobs. They were never responded, boring postings, managers who couldn't interview, recruiters who couldn't screen out candidates or couldn't attract candidates. And it was like all this money being poured out, wasted. Well, in the last 25 years since then, tens of billions, probably close to $400 to $500 billion have been spent on all of this HR technology. And I'm going to say nothing's changed. What's changed is everybody can now find a job in minutes when they get aggravated. Literally, when I decided to quit 40
that's
years
a big
ago,
change, right? There's more possibility and opportunity for them to leave if they're unhappy. And that we're seeing that now, right? In droves with this great resignation. So that is a big change.
So the change is, but even before that, you could find another job quickly with the technology. Mm-hmm. So that means that all these companies were getting all these new candidates applying to jobs, but only 1% of people who apply to a job actually get it. So there's 99% of all of this application is an overhead. So you ask what changed, I'm saying nothing's changed. We still got all of these inefficiencies. So we've designing the AI technology for the wrong reason. I even call it AI, which is artificial intelligence. I call it artificial stupidity. There's no reason you should do this stuff at scale. It's like, why would you hire people the bad way? Why being more efficient doing something wrong? So my whole focus is, hey, let's spend more time with fewer people as long as they're the right people, give them better career moves, hire them for the long term, not for the day one. And most candidates and companies hire for what they get on the start date. What's my comp? What's the salary? What's the title? What's the location? What are the benefits? Fine, I'll take that job. And there's this real short-term thinking on both sides of the desk. So my cynical approach, Penny, and I'm sorry to say it's pretty cynical.
I like that. Keep going. I like cynical thinking.
Cynical. I don't think much is going to change until the candidates themselves say, no, I'm going to hire for the long term. I'm not just going to be lured by the dollars. I'm going to be lured by the best career move. And I think there's a group of candidates, top 25%, who actually think that way. There's a group of hiring managers who actually hire that way. But most, by and large, in most cases, it doesn't go that way. The public job market is inefficient, focused on all the wrong criteria, and candidates who apply to that they complain and they get aggravated and they justify it, but continues to go on and they put Band-Aid solutions on it to try to improve it. But in the hidden job market, referrals, good hiring managers, it's done the right way. And unfortunately, I don't see that moving into the public job market.
Okay, hold on. I want to unpack some of the things that you said.
No, there's a lot of stuff there.
And maybe challenge some of those things, right? So people are leaving because they're unhappy, but I think they're unhappy because the companies aren't living their values. They're not being flexible and meeting them where they're at, right? I think there's some real purpose behind why people are leaving and that they're looking for companies that are fit for long term. It just happens to be that people are throwing money at them right now. And if I can work in a company that meets my needs and pays me twice as much or these premiums that are being put on today, then I'm going to do that. So I guess to back up, what I hear you saying is that all of these extra technology systems and all of that only adds to more money out the door for paying these fees and then have to review more candidates, and that there's a lot of overhead, right? So that's the one thing.
I totally support what you're saying, that candidates are frustrated and they should leave. Unfortunately, they accept jobs for the same reasons they accepted that first one.
How do you know that?
Because here's how I know it is. Over the last 40 years, I've interviewed 10,000 candidates. And in that interview, and in my book, Hire With Your Head, I give the interview. I ask candidates 100% of the time, why did you leave your last job? They all say, because it wasn't a good job, it wasn't a good fit, and I took this new job for a career move. And I said, okay, so when you went from job A to job B, did you get what you want? And they said, no, because they didn't deliver the promise. It wasn't as good a job as I thought. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I said, why'd you go from job C to job D? Exactly the same reason. So every single candidate in the world says, I'm leaving for a better career opportunity. But when you ask them why it didn't happen, it always is they focus on what they got on the start date, not the work they're doing. Not one candidate, that's not true. Very few candidates say, tell me the work I'm doing. I'd like to give you some examples of work that I'm doing. And they said, I want to take that job because of that work that I'm doing. And no candidate takes that. The reason they say they're doing it is to get a better career, but they make the superficial judgment on what the company tells them and what the comp package is. So I agree with 100%. They're leaving for the wrong reasons, but they're accepting jobs for the wrong reasons too.
Okay. So what I'm understanding is that they're leaving because they're not getting developed. They're not
absolutely
moving in the career position. And I've seen that a lot too in the companies that I've worked with and talked to, is that one of these aspects of they don't have the time. They focus on all these other things that are less important, and they're not developing their people in the right way. And therefore they're leaving, and they're even hiring in people to where they could be taking it from internally, right? As opposed to seeing and giving their people the opportunity to take those additional positions. I see
a lot of promises are made, and I fault both companies and candidates. They don't do due diligence needed to really determine if that job's a good fit. They don't ask, tell me what kind of projects I'm going to work on. Companies try to throw money at people to get them to accept. There's this very short-term thinking. When candidates want to leave a bad situation, leaving a situation is painful. So to avoid the pain, hey, I'll take a better job, better pay, closer to home, better title. And the superficialities of that drive the decision making. Mm-hmm. And then they're caught, 2 years later, they have the same problem. It's called job hunting syndrome. And you can see it time after time after time. They take jobs for short-term reasons and realize that the long-term never gets there. But in my mind, it's the candidate's fault by not asking the right questions.
So you mentioned one question. What are some other questions that the candidates should be asking? And then I want to switch over to the employer side.
Well, I do both. I would say, here's what, over the years, I've actually prepped thousands of candidates. You do 100 a year or 200 a year. After 20 years or 40 years, it's a lot of people. And I always say, and I wrote an art in the book, The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired. I describe how to hire people and also what candidates can do to make sure that they're getting the right information. So that's the answer to your question. But
let's have, for the people who are listening, what are concretely 2 questions or
that's what I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay.
What I'm going to say. So here's here's how I prep my candidates. I tell a candidate, if you feel you're being judged improperly, first impressions, and they're going in some direction that you know is bad, you say time out. Well, you don't say time out. You just say, interviewer, could you please give me a quick overview of the job and some of the challenges involved in the job? I'd like to give you some examples of work that I've done that's most comparable to that.
Okay.
That forces the company to define the work and gives the candidate an opportunity to answer questions about his or her background related to that work. And if you do that over the course of an interview, number one, the interviewer will say, wow, this person's pretty gutsy to ask that question. And number two, you'll actually have a chance to see if this is a job you really want or not want. So,
and be able to put your best foot forward as well.
I'm sorry, say that again, Penny.
Sorry, and be able to put your best foot forward as well, because you're matching the expectations of this is the role, here's how I can serve that role. Absolutely. Okay, that's a great tip. Is there one more from that side?
Yeah, well, I can give you 100 of them, but the one I would also say at the end of the interview, if it's not clear that you're being invited back, they say, hey, Penny, we'd like to have you, we'd really like your background, we'd like to have you come back in a week or so. What's your interest in this job? If they don't say that, you need to say, is there anything in my background? Or first, you got to say, what are the next steps? Then you say, is there anything in my background that you don't feel is a good fit for the job? And then that person has to answer, hem and haw. But if you really kind of understand, the beginning is, hey, you got to describe performance objectives in the job, and you've got to then make sure you're doing it. Also, as you're sitting there as a candidate, you got to say, my biggest strength is managing a group of people. So then the candidate's got to say, well, we didn't even talk about that. At the end of the interview, they're kind of keeping track of what they did.
Right.
Hey, hiring manager or interviewer, is managing a group of people to accomplish a project like such and such important to the job? And that's like forcing the question to say, okay, of course it is. Well, let me tell you about something I've done related to that. So it's a way to get the interviewer to ask a question about your greatest strength. You just say, is this important? You got to make sure it is important, and then give an example of where it is important. It's kind of like this slam dunk kind of approach to answering questions.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is your preparation is critical, right? So that you're ready for those types of things. You have the opportunity, because I think people feel like that's not the opportunity for them to take control if it's not going in the direction that they had hoped. I love that you're making people aware of, yes, you can do that, right? You can ask a question that's going to shift the dynamic so you can put your best foot forward. So that's
just
fantastic.
Think about also, you have to have guts to do that. So not only is the question itself meaningful in the interchange, the ability to ask the question shows you have enough confidence. That's as important as answering the question properly.
Absolutely.
And if you can't,
I love that.
Afraid to answer the question, you're not a strong enough person for that job.
That's right. I love that, right? How you unpack that a little bit, because with everything that we do, there are those ancillary types of meanings and impressions that they make, right? It's not just about the question. It's all those things that question also represents. So I love that.
That's how you're going to ask when you're on the job. Okay, so you're for an accounting job. You're going to have guts enough to ask somebody in manufacturing why they've got a cost problem, or a sales rep ask a customer to get into their needs. So this is just normal communication back and forth, but you're converting that interview to a dialogue back and forth to demonstrate your true personality.
Great. So let's shift to the employer side, right? Because many people who might be listening, maybe running their own companies, they may be head of HR or head of their department, and they're struggling right now. They're struggling with A, finding good people, and B, they're struggling with getting those people hired and getting them on board. So what kind of focus do you think is what matters most for that group of people?
I've written a couple books and 20 years of training around that, and it's a critical question. The big one is strategic. So there's a video on YouTube, it would be called Lou Adler Catch 22. So if you find that video, and it was done with LinkedIn about 7 or 8 years ago, but I've looked at it in the last 6 months and it's still relevant. But I basically say everyone's got all these hiring problems, not seeing enough people, not interviewing properly, people aren't responding to their job postings. Mm-hmm. I say these are all legitimate problems. But the reality is you got a bad, down deep, you got the wrong talent strategy. Your talent strategy is designed to weed out the weak as opposed to attract the best. So my focus is if you don't want to attract the best, you're not going to hire anybody. You're just going to hire the desperate and the needy. So attracting the best requires good jobs. What do the best people want? They want a good job that puts them on a better career path. And they want a competitive comp. If you don't have a competitive comp, you're out of the game. But as long as you're competitive in the top half, top third of your peer group in terms of for that job, then all these other variables, the work, the culture, the environment, the learning opportunities become more important. But then you have to attract people. You got to say, okay, how am I going to attract people? My big theme, and we do a lot of recruiting marketing, is tell compelling stories. At this position, you'll be able to use your X and Y talents to accomplish these big things. Make it attractive. Tell a story. Don't put this list of must-have and skills and be demeaning. Attract people by offering true career moves. And don't try to do it in a transaction. The best people can't make a job decision in 24 hours. They have to study it. They have to understand it. They have to have it as back and forth dialogue. So I always say spend more time with fewer people. Just make sure they're the right people. But use an attract-in strategy rather than a weed out the weak talent strategy, and at least you're in the game. A host of tactics to support that strategy, but telling stories and offering compelling jobs is one of the key ones.
Because if you think about in sales, right, storytelling strategies are absolutely critical in sales as well. Is like you, just to relate it, because some people, they may not get what you're saying. Like you're just saying that their ladder's on the wrong wall, right? And they need to shift their focus.
Great analogy, right?
Right? They need to shift their focus. And once they shift their focus, everything will fall into place and they'll focus on the right thing. So I always say that too, that it's not about when we focus on the transaction, right? Then that's the wrong place. We need to focus on the relationship, and that relationship is going to be developed through stories and showing people that. And so in sales, they're telling those stories. They're attracting people. They're building that emotional connection, and for people to really see themselves in it through the stories. And they could talk about the features and benefits, but they want to know what's the end result? Like, how is this going to grow me? Because that's why they're making a development. So I love that. You're totally in line with like my whole idea of shifting people's focus. I call myself a focusologist. You too, Lou, are a focusologist. Because we help people to see where they're focused in the wrong area and what a huge difference it makes to shift that. So I love that is telling compelling stories. And I love that example that you gave. And so, well, right there, drop the mic. If people just went away and put that into practice, they would see some big differences in attracting the right people.
I look at it is that, and you talked about everybody wants a better career opportunity, but that's not a transaction. Understanding the job, understanding why it's a good career move for a candidate takes more than an hour interview. And if from the client standpoint, if you want to hire for the long term, you got to spend more than 1 hour interviewing a candidate. Say, it makes a good first impression. It's got the right skills, nice personality. Let's hire the person. So it does take due diligence on both sides to make the right long-term decision. That's why, but then they say, I don't have enough time. Well,
that's the big thing.
Huh?
I think that's the big thing is people make decisions too quickly because they're like, well, we need to get a butt in the seat. And they're sacrificing, it's costing them so much more in the long run to put that butt in that seat just to put a warm butt in the seat.
Yep. Well, the point is, from a company standpoint, they know they had to hire 100 people next quarter, but they start thinking about it next quarter as opposed to this quarter. So I always say, hey, spend more time talking with the right people and fewer people, just like in sales, your analogy there, Penny. Yeah. Sales reps don't talk to everybody in the world. They pre-qualify the people before they talk to them. They got to be a buyer. They got to be ready to buy. They have to have that product need. And they do a lot of pre-qualification work. Well, companies need to do the same kind of pre-qualification work. Let's find people who can do the work, who are clearly been recognized for doing that work well, and would see our job as a career move. Well, that takes reach out to that small group of people rather than everybody by posting a boring job that's nothing more than an ill-defined lateral transfer and hoping a good person applies.
Right. That's awesome. So I guess I think what you've given us is gold, and we're going to include all the links to your books and everything on the show notes. Didn't I ask you that you wish that I would have asked you so that you could share that with the audience?
Well, let's say this. I was going to tell you, I was going to mention it anyway, because I'm still a recruiter and a closer. I would say the thing you didn't ask is from a recruiter standpoint. So this is the question I, as a recruiter, always ask my hiring managers. So this is a kind of a good way to kind of summarize it. And this is the heart and soul of performance-based hiring. When I take a search assignment, and literally I've done thousands, and I still take them, but I don't do the search anymore. That's in my retired state. I just help companies define the work. When I go into a company, and I've done this on my first assignment 44 years ago, when I look at a job description, in most cases, it's nothing more than a list of skills, experience, and competencies. And 100% of the time when I see it, I tell the hiring manager, this is not a job description. A job doesn't have skills. A job doesn't have competencies, academics, or experience. That's a person description. Let's put the person description in the parking lot. What do you want this person to do in order for this person to be considered successful? And it's always a series of 5 or 6 key performance objectives: defining the task, defining the work, defining the action required, build a team of accountants to launch a new project, launch this new project within 6 months that penetrates and gets 10% market share, build a sales team, design a circuit that can accomplish A, B, and C that we can have produced in 18 months. It's always work. Mm-hmm. Then I always tell a hiring manager, would you see someone who can do this work, who has a different mix of skills, experience, and competencies, but has been recognized for doing this work extremely well? Managers say, of course I would. And that's how you open the pool to everybody. Non-traditional candidates, diverse talent, people who have a different mix of skills and experience, different academic background. What I tell managers is don't compromise on the ability to do the work. Compromise on the mix of skills needed to do that work, because everybody's different. High potential people can do that work more quickly. People in different industries can do that work. They bring a different skill set. So the idea, so if you ask me what's foundational, is how you define work as a series of key performance objectives, not a list of skills, experience, and competencies. You do that on both sides of the desk. When I suggest what a candidate should do, it's asking, hey, what is work needs to be done? So it takes away from the candidate's personality and background to focus on that candidate's ability to do that work. To me, that's the difference maker.
And when they know the objective, they're not going to resist it when they enter the organization, right? They're not going to be like, oh, I didn't know that's what, exactly right. I've got to increase the department by 10%. They're really crystal clear on what the objective is. I love that.
Well, that's what you said earlier. Remember when we started, you were going to push back on the idea that everybody wants career growth. Well, how do you know that if you haven't asked what the career growth opportunities is? This way you ensure it.
Well, sure. But they use it from a position, not the objective, but they use it like, well, if you're a junior, let's say an account executive, then you can grow to be, and they usually use titles, right? This is the way you move through the titles. So, my mind wasn't, obviously you've been doing this a long time, right? So you get right to the juice. I wasn't thinking about it, but from an objective perspective is much more defined, much more clear as to how they're going to develop.
And even if I was talking with a candidate in that way, I would say, candidate, to be a senior accountant executive, here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to put a territory plan together. You're going to have to start targeting major accounts. Mm-hmm. We're going to give you a chance to do that. We'll walk you along. We'll train you how to do it. So now I'm showing that junior executive, sales executive for dealing mid-level accounts to handle major enterprise accounts, the sequence of steps needed to get there. That becomes pretty appealing to a person, whether it's an engineer, accountant, marketing person, whatever, sales rep. It's understanding that track record and the steps needed to achieve it are critical to get to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Love it. So I want to ask you, I ask most of my guests this just because it's so interesting in the variety of answers. So what's your definition of productivity and why?
Well, that's a good question, but I'd say I'll kind of take it from a couple different directions. Being productive is an output, and being able to accomplish X certain period of time is fine. If you can accomplish X plus 20% in that same period of time, you're better. That's productive. Is that appropriate? I don't know. I think what's more important is being able to make X 2X and do it a totally different way. So being more efficient is one way to be more productive. being more effective, in my mind, is a better way to be more productive. And as a manager, I'm going to try to hire people who I'm going to train them not to necessarily be more efficient. I'm going to show them how to be more effective. So the definition of productivity really is a term that really has so many different definitions. You just got to understand the components of how it all gets put together. I don't know if that was a very good answer, Penny, but if I had to answer it again, I'd probably come up with a more pithy response.
Well, the thing is that like you said, it's a little ambiguous. Everybody has a different definition. And we hear people saying we want our people to be more productive. Well, nobody sees that as the same thing. Not a single person that's been on the show has given me the same answer. There's been various variations. So I was just curious, right? When we look at someone's mindset and how you've presented your experience and how you think about things, I'd like to see, well, how do you define certain terms, right? You said, and that's interesting.
Have any more terms? This is kind of fun.
Well, I think you can do that about a lot of terms, because where we come from, the state of mind that we're in and the way that we think determines, in many cases, for these like touchy-feely types of words, happiness. What's happiness?
Was that a rhetorical question?
Let's ask that, since you wanted some more words. What's happiness?
I come think about that. So I remember when I was an intern, some job many, many years ago, and I certainly realized in my mind what that was in relationship to work. It was a very technical project, and I was trying to solve a very difficult mathematical problem. And after about working on it 4 or 5 hours in a day, I said, I made major strides, and and it was like a 10-week project. And I felt that, hey, this is when I was 20 years old or 21, so it's 50 plus years ago, obviously. I realized, wow, that's pretty cool. I felt internally satisfied that I achieved progress for that day. And I left. And the boss said, you left? I said, yeah. And he couldn't believe it. And I said, look, here's why. He said, yeah, you should have left. Now, I don't know that that's a definition of happiness, but it's a definition of what I call satisfaction. And when I look at every single day, I say, hey, did I make something happen from relationship to work that was personally satisfying and motivating? And so that's how I would look at it. Happiness in general, as you get my age, happiness is having less doctor's appointment in a given week. So, it does change with age. But if I had to work at Pearly Work, have I done work that I feel is satisfying and motivating to me? And have I progressed along the goals that I want? But then I go back to the question I asked about goals, and I think we might want to leave it with this. I don't think the question of where do you want to be in 5 years is a good question. I think it's a stupid question.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I would say a good question is, what's the biggest goal you've ever had, Penny, that you've already achieved?
That's a great question.
That's a good, and then say, okay, now what's your next goal? Not all of a sudden I can say, making a goal for 5, what a waste of time. It's what's the biggest goal you've established for yourself, and have you already achieved it? Now tell me, Penny, about something, a new goal for you, and I want to see if you're going to get there. So you can kind of relate the two. Now you got a track record of goal setting and achievement versus just some bunch of words that are glib and you've responded for some book you've read by Adam Grant, which is a great guy, but that doesn't mean that it's a good answer to the right question.
Right. I really love that question. And I actually ask myself that question, right? Because it's not exactly like that. But when I'm setting goals and I've reached that big goal that I set for myself, it's like, okay, what's next? Like, what's that next big goal? I do believe in setting big goals to help you to challenge yourself and become the best person that you can be. I'm a big fan of Jim Collins and the Big Hairy Audacious Goal, because I think it makes us think differently. And I think you get that, because I can hear from just the shift in focus of bringing people to understand that it's about the performance, right, over the definition of the person. That would be something that drives you too, is looking at what's that next thing that you can accomplish.
Yep, no question. Even
if it's lifestyle or whatever it is, right? So maybe leave the question with, what's next for you?
Is that also rhetorical or?
No, actually, it is for everybody who's listening, right? I can ask that next, but what's next for you, Lou, before, and tell people where they can find you as well.
Audience, I am 75 years old. So when you're 75 years old, you kind of have a different outlook on life and what's important. And certainly health is one of those. But from a work perspective, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't enjoy understanding the concept of work in those relationships. Mm-hmm. So the goal that I have, and I'm actually talking to my agent tomorrow about this, my book agent, I think there's another book there that focuses on work from a bunch of different perspectives, all of those questions you've talked about. And also it's, why haven't we gotten better? It's like, you asked me the question, and I'm pretty cynical about this. I mean, I've bring this cartoon out, and it's in the book, the new book, Hire With Your Head. I start with that cartoon, and I have the goal, I said, the win-win hiring, where the hiring manager is excited that the person stayed there on the anniversary date. And the candidate says, I'm so glad I took this job on the anniversary date, and I'm glad to stay here. Achieving that win-win hiring outcome is very, very challenging. And I'm trying to really understand why it hasn't happened and if it's possible to happen. So my goal is to figure that out. Hopefully I achieve it, but even just trying to achieve it is what drives me every single day.
Awesome. I love it, right? It sounds like you're very passionate about it. So that's the next step. So thank you for being here. Where's the best website for them to go to? It'll be in the show notes, but go ahead and tell us.
I guess there's one that I don't love, but it's louadlergroup.com.
Okay.
But you could also find it at performancebasedhiring.com. So that's probably the one I would connect. That's why I say Lou Adler Group is one we've kind of hidden, but that's actually the one. But louadlergroup.com and performancebasedhiring.com will get you to where we are.
Okay, fantastic. They'll all be in the show notes.
Right.
So thank you so much for being here. I enjoyed picking your brain.
Great. Delightful. Thank you very much for inviting me, Penny.
And thank you all for being here, because you're an important part of this show. And I know that you're going to get a lot out of this. And I hope you took notes, and I hope you put an action plan together of how you're going to put this into practice, because that's the key, is not just listening to this show, but then putting down an action that you're going to take immediately following, so that it doesn't become something that was a great idea, but you didn't put it into practice. So put it into practice. And also you can decide for yourself, what's next for you? What's that next big goal for you? Since we posed that at the end, I think that's a great question for all of us to think about. So my name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. I'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.